Goblin launch detected.
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Just a heads up, but Flipside Gaming is going to be giving away a Zendikar Rising set booster box. The contest will run from August 31st all the way to September 25th, 2020. The typical rules apply of 1 entry per household. You'll be entered for your chance to win when you use my promo code on an order of $10 or more, or if you send Flipside Gaming a stamped, self-addressed envelope or postcard to the address found above. So good luck and have fun! Today's game is another multi-zone matchup, with Max playing his Inalla deck. He keeps Command Tower, Dismal Backwater, Is It Signet, Ghostly Flicker, Crystal Shard, Naban, and an Omen Speaker. Kevin is playing Marchesa, keeping Talisman of Dominance, Plague Crafter, Demonic Tutor, Mana Confluence, Chasm Skulker, Triskelion, and Swamp. Seb is playing his Ur-Dragon deck, keeping Overgrown Tomb, Steam Vents, Dragonlord Kolaghan, Chromatic Lantern, Dragon's Horde, Forest, and Godless Shrine. And last but not least, Joey is playing Yuriko, keeping Temporal Mastery, Reliquary Tower, 2 Islands, Swamp, Temple of the False God, and a Triton Shorestalker. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. Max plays a Dismal Backwater, gaining 1 life as it enters tapped. Kevin plays a Swamp and passes. Seb plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb, not that you can tell with all the glare. Joey plays an Island and casts his Triton Shorestalker. Max's turn has him playing Command Tower and then casting an Is It Signet. Kevin plays an Island and casts Demonic Tutor. He goes to his library, passing while searching. Seb plays another tap Shockland, this time his Godless Shrine, and then taps his Overgrown Tomb to cast a Birds of Paradise. Joey plays a Swamp for turn and casts a Fairy Seer. It comes in and he scries 2. He keeps both on top and then goes to combat, hitting Seb with a Triton. Max's turn has him playing a tap Fetid Pools and he brings out Naban in his main phase, passing to Kevin. Kevin plays Mana Confluence and then casts a Soul Ring. The Soul Ring then gets tapped for Talisman of Dominance, and Kevin taps out for Chasm Skulker, losing 1 life from the Mana Confluence before passing. Seb keeps dropping tap Shocklands, this time with the Steam Vents. He does cast a Dragon's Horde though, and passes turn. Joey draws and plays an Island. He casts Brainstorm in his main phase and draws 3 before setting 2 back. He then casts a Soul Ring, and hits Seb again with the Triton and passes to Max. Max casts an Omen Speaker in his main phase, which has its Enter the Battlefield trigger doubled thanks to Naban being out. He scries 2 not once, but twice, putting some on the bottom and leaving some on top, and passing turn. Kevin draws, putting another counter onto his Chasm Skulker, and then loses 1 as he casts Marchesa, and passes to Seb. Seb plays an Exotic Orchard, and taps a lot of mana for a Balefire Dragon. With it on the stack, Joey casts Vampiric Tutor, losing 2 life to go and find a card and put it on top of his library. The dragon then resolves, and we move to Joey's turn. Joey draws and plays a Reliquary Tower. He goes to combat, with the Triton going at Seb and the Fairy at Max. He uses Commander Jitsu to bring in Yuriko, and then just plain old boring ninjutsu to bring out a Misplayed Shinobi. They both connect for 1, with the Misplayed bouncing Seb's Balefire back to hand. Joey then resolves the 2 Yuriko triggers, and his first reveal deals 6 to his opponents, while the second, an Island, does nothing. Max draws, and also casts a Talisman of Dominance. He then swings his Wizard team at Joey, who can't block, and takes the hit to the face. Max then passes to Kevin. Kevin draws, and puts a counter onto the Skulker. He then goes to combat, swinging his team at Joey to get a Dethrone trigger. This adds another +1/+1 counter to the Skulker, and the first to Marchesa. In his second main phase, Kevin then casts a Plague Crafter. It enters, forcing everyone to sacrifice a creature, and Kevin decides to bin the Chasm Skulker, gaining some squid tokens and a delayed trigger for it to return at the end of turn. He then passes, bringing the Skulker back at the end of turn. Seb's turn is very quick, playing a forest and then recasting the Balefire Dragon and passing. Joey plays a Temple of the False God, and then taps enough mana for a Dimir Cluestone. He replays the Fairy Seer, scrying 2 again and keeping them on top. Moving to combat, the Mistblade goes at Max, who can't block, and before damage, swaps in Yuriko. She connects for 1, and Joey reveals a Dream Cache, dealing 3 to all of his opponents. In his second main phase, Joey then recasts the Triton, passing to Max. Max taps a lot of mana in his main phase for a Pondering Mage, but doesn't get any triggers from it as it's countered by Arcane Denial from Kevin. Kevin justifies this by saying that Max will draw cards either way, and Max then passes. On Kevin's upkeep, Max draws 2 and Kevin draws 1, and Kevin then draws for turn. He heads to combat, swinging the tokens at Joey and the Crafter at Max. The Crafter gets a +1/+1 counter, and Joey then takes 3. In his second main phase, Kevin then plays at a Cabal Coffers as his land for turn. He casts a Sensei's Divining Top and passes. Seb draws and casts Chromatic Lantern, and then has enough for Nicol Bolas Ravager. With it entering, his opponents have to discard a card, and Seb wastes no time while they're deciding, announcing he's swinging his Balefire at Joey. Joey blocks the Fairy Seer, and with nothing else, Seb passes. Joey plays an island for turn and casts the Dream Cache. He swings Yuriko at Max, poor Max, and the Triton at Seb. Before damage, he swaps out the Triton for a Silent Blade Oni, and Kevin responds before damage though, using Chaos Orb on the Oni. This has Joey shuffling it into his library, and he then reveals Temporal Manipulation off the top, but it stays there. This means that when he resolves his Yuriko trigger, his opponents are each going to take 5. 1 blue then gets Joey a good old Triton in his second main phase, and he passes to Max. Max plays Evolving Wilds, sacrificing it to find a snow-covered island. He then pays 5 mana for a Gilded Lotus, and passes to Kevin. Kevin draws, and gets another counter on his Skulker. He turns his stuff sideways, leaving 1 lonely squid behind, and swings them all at Joey, who's currently got the most life at this point. This lets Kevin add some +1/+1 counters to his creature, and Joey says he won't block, and with that, Kevin uses Brainstorm to add 3 more counters to his Skulker before damage. This ends up with Joey dropping to 2. In his second main phase, Kevin plays a Sulphurous Springs and casts Gonti. He targets Seb with the ETB trigger, keeping one of the cards from Seb's top 4. Seb draws and counts up the creatures and power on Kevin's side. He's not super happy about the size of Kevin's board, but he's also worried about Joey with that extra turn spell. He doesn't have an easy choice, and I don't envy him, so he casts Niv-Mizzet Reborn to hopefully find a better answer. The dragon enters and whiffs completely. Max then makes a deal with Seb and casts Merfolk Trickster, having Marchesa lose her abilities. Seb then capitalizes on this by smashing into Kevin with his Balefire Dragon, dealing the same amount of damage to all of Kevin's creatures. The beefy Chasm Skulker does survive though because of the +1/+1 counters, and with nothing else, Seb then passes. Joey plays an island for his turn, and to the surprise of no one, he casts the extra turn spell, Temporal Manipulation. He then plays a Changeling Outcast, and then a Thought Vessel. He swings the trusty Triton at Max, and Yuriko at Kevin. Once no blocks are declared, Joey ninjutsus in the Mistblade again. This has Kevin and Max each taking 1, and Joey then resolves the Mistblade trigger, bouncing Naban back to Max's hand. He then has another 2 Yuriko triggers to resolve. It's a Siren Storm Tamer and a land, dealing only 1 to his opponents. In his second main phase, Joey then casts the Siren Storm Tamer and his trusty Triton again. He then passes to himself. Joey draws and plays a Swamp. He sacrifices the Cluestone and draws a card from it. He then plays out a Phyrexian Reclamation and goes to combat. The Changeling goes at Max, and the Mistblade and Yuriko at Kevin. This has Kevin taking 2 and Max taking 1, with Joey getting 3 Yuriko triggers. He reveals Familiar's Ruse, an island, and a prickly bogart, dealing a total of 3 to his opponents. Joey then passes turn. Max pays 2 for Demir Signet, and then casts Crystal Shard. He then recasts Naban, and passes to Kevin. At the end of turn, Kevin casts Mystical Tutor, but Joey puts to stack a counter with Familiar's Ruse, bouncing a creature back to hand. Kevin then activates the top to see if he has a counter for it, doesn't, and has to let it resolve. Kevin taps his Sol Ring in his main phase for an Expedition map, and then taps 1 more mana to activate it to go and find a land. It's Urborg, which he plays immediately, and activates the Cabal Coffers. He then activates his top to draw a card, and then puts the top on the top. He uses that floating black mana he made a few seconds ago, and 1 blue to overload a Cyclonic Rift, and then passes to Seb. Seb draws and casts Dragon's Horde, Chromatic Lantern, and then passes, discarding down to 7. Joey plays a Swamp for turn, and casts his Sol Ring, and then his Thought Vessel. We then see a Prickly Bogart again, the Changeling, the Triton, and the Storm Tamer hitting the field in rapid succession. With nothing else, he passes to Max. Max plays out his Demir Signet, and then taps that Signet to cast an Izzet Signet. He then taps that Signet for a Talisman, and passes turn, discarding down to 7. Kevin draws and loses 1 as he recasts Marchesa. He then loses another life as he taps a Talisman for a blue, and uses it to help to cast the Chasm Skulker. He then passes to Seb. Seb untaps and draws. He casts a Ruby Medallion, and then plays Dragonlord Kolaghan. He swings the Dragonlord at Max, strangely enough, and then passes to Joey. Joey draws for turn, and counts up his mana. He swings the Triton at Max, the Changeling at Seb, and the Siren at Kevin. Before damage, but after blocks have been passed, Joey brings out Yuriko and the Mistblade. They connect, dealing 1 each, and he bounces the Skulker to Kevin's hand with the Mistblade trigger. Joey then gets 3 Yuriko triggers, revealing Time Warp, Connive and Concoct, and a Swamp. That's 14 damage to each opponent, which is enough to take just about everyone out. And since Seb knows that he has that extra turn card in his hand, the game is pretty much in Joey's favor, and Seb scoops it up. Game review time. So I do think this is a tough game with a lot of tough choices, and I don't envy anyone in it. There was a turn where I think Seb could have taken Joey out by swinging Nicol Bolas at him, but he didn't, and instead only swung the Balefire at Kevin. I think he didn't swing at Joey because he was afraid that Kevin would have had some kind of trick and stopped him, and he was counting on his opponents to help him out if that was the case. Kevin also had a very difficult and similar decision, forcing him to have to use a Cyclonic Rift in his main phase as opposed to on someone else's turn, like I'm sure everyone else would prefer to. He really couldn't afford to let the mana go to waste from the Cabal Coffers, and this kind of forced his hand. I do think using the Arcane Denial on the Pondering Mage was probably his loosest play of this game, since I really don't think Max getting 2 triggers from that was worthwhile. Speaking of Max, he seemed to be everyone's punching bag this game, and he wasn't really able to hit his land drops, and it seemed like all he was able to do was cast Mana Rocks. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.